No, I'm sorry. If you cannot vote, you cannot be trusted with any choice whatsoever. We asked post-Soviet leftists what the Western left is getting wrong on Ukraine. Oh boy. So where do we even begin? Wait, hold on. I'm a post-Soviet leftist. I just realized I'm from the post-Soviet sphere. I'm from Poland. I'm a leftist. I'm a post-Soviet leftist. Wow. Should I add this into my title? Write in the chat if you think that I should add to my title post-Soviet leftist. That sounds so proud. The post-Soviet leftist. Do you think it's accurate for me to title myself as such? Or do you think it's a gross misinformation? You gotta add that. True. I should. It should be like, I'm a proud post-Soviet leftist. You might attract angry rightoids. Nice. Thank you. Okay. Right. That is great. That is perfect. I'm gonna start introducing myself as a post-Soviet leftist. I haven't even thought of that, but that is actually technically speaking true. Not if you're not a person from either the Soviet Union or from the Soviet sphere, okay? Only if you're from a country that was in the Soviet sphere can you call yourself the post-Soviet leftist. All right. Perfection. Since Russia invaded Ukraine in February, how old is this? Oh my gosh, this is such an old article. 31st of March 2022. We're doing a blast to the past. Does Poland count as Soviet? It was part of the sphere. It was a satellite state. So it's post-Soviet. It was part of the sphere. So I count it in. Okay? Since Russia invaded Ukraine in February, our TV channels, newspapers, social media platforms, and group chats have been flooded with analyses trying to make sense of the unfolding situation. Everything from NATO expansionism, Europe's racist refugee policies, and neo-Nazis in Ukraine. Oh my God, we're gonna have to be talking about England today. We're gonna have to be bashing England today again. Because, England has done it again. England has outdone itself. I didn't write this in the title because there's so many topics to cover, but oh God, do I want to cover that particular topic. It's bad. It is very, very bad. This is what you get when you have too much. Oh, wait, I have actually two immigration topics. And don't worry, I don't want to spoil for all the loyal viewers that are excited for me to cover them. I don't want to spoil, but it's exciting in a very negative, horrible way. NATO expansionism, Europe racist refugee policies, and neo-Nazis in Ukraine, to whether uniting the Soviet Union would be good. Oh, fuck me. That's actually a discussion in the West. Whether or not uniting the Soviet Union would be good. I cannot believe that's actually a topic of conversation. Yeah, I evened out the poll. Hello, I'm just here to watch a trash fire. Thank you. I evened it out. Thank you. Hello, Estelle. Yeah, the poll doesn't matter anymore. You do not deserve democracy. Our media cycle has mostly focused on proposed reforms to disability benefits. Also, while we're at it, I have also had a whole debate with Brooks about Russia, believe it or not. Like, there was this time when Brooks said on his thing that he loves the Russian culture. This guy, I don't even remember what that was. Something that I had great contention with. Something about Russian culture being great and something Russia related, Russia chauvinism related. And I wrote in the chat that I don't agree. And they're right, you know. And then I had a whole debate with him on it in DMs. And then we sort of concluded the thing when I had Brooks on this stream. It was a whole thing, you know? And it was like, in that debate that I had in the DMs, it sort of came out that even Brooks is sort of caught in the Russian thing. How do I explain it? Russia steals a lot of things, okay? There's no other way to say it. Russia steals a lot of cultural things, a lot of things that people in the West look at and say, oh my gosh, this is great. I love this about Russia. And then you have to correct them. Well, it's not Russian, okay? Like, I think for my conversation with Brooks, that was when Brooks said, oh, but I love things about Russia, like borscht or some other things listed. And I said, wait, hold on. Borscht is not Russian, okay? It's Ukrainian. Like, I know that it became a broader Eastern European thing. Every Eastern European country has a variation of borscht at this point, but it originated in, okay, convenient Estelle. The fact that this comment, all things are stolen, just demonstrates that you don't know what I mean. Like, that you don't know Russia, okay? It's not stolen in the sense of, oh, this place has it and now we also have it and we also use it. No, I'm saying stolen in the sense of this place has it, now we have it, it was always ours, we invented it, it belongs to us, and it's a quintessentially, essentially part of what has always been ours. That is what I mean. Okay? It's not just adopting a thing from another place and calling it stealing. Okay? That is called cultures intermingling, cultures interacting, and sharing each other's stuff with one another. That is just what happens. Cultures intermingle, cultures sort of interact, and cultures affect and change one another. There's a fundamental difference between that happening and what Russia does with its quote-unquote stealing of things. Thank you. It made me go into a whole rant. I don't think it's necessarily wrong for us. The West, the aesthetic of the Soviet Union is interesting. NFKRZ is good at explaining it. Listen, NFKRZ has, I remember it has caught a lot of flack from Ukrainian people at some point. But yes, and I still remember when dear NFKRZ made a video called My Favorite Russian Dishes, and a lot of those dishes were not Russian, and he had to add a whole caveat in the video saying, yes, I know most of these dishes are not Russian, but they are eaten in Russia. So there you have it. Like, there's this really, I'm done talking about Russian expansionist chauvinism, etc. It's a real phenomenon. Actually, Putin's childhood trauma and Zelensky's comedy career has been debated endlessly. Childhood trauma of Vladimir Putin? Oh no! The KGB thugs, childhood trauma. How will we cope with such sad things? That is so tragic and horrible. I hope my thoughts and prayers go out to Vladimir Putin and his tragic past. Yet, throughout all this, I've had an unsettling feeling that some leftists I know have been hesitant in their analysis of the war because they're not sure how their opposition to Western imperialism maps onto it. Oh my God. This is what I call campism in its worst form. Like, you don't analyze events individually, you don't look at things, and you don't sort of apply critical thinking or any sort of thinking. No, you just have a model in your head and think, okay, how does this event fit my model? How does it fit this sort of model that I have established in my brain? And if it doesn't, then you just glitch out and cannot approach the subject at all. Or you just start spewing complete idiotic crap. That is unfortunate. So yeah, that is unfortunate. That is then the unfortunate reality. You can have just a simplified model in your mind, and if something doesn't meet it, doesn't fit it, your brain just freezes. Then that's it. The end. Oh, there we go, actually. Many of my friends and family have either been extremely quiet, understandably given how complex the situation. No, I'm sorry, no. No. It's not understandable to be extremely quiet on the topic of war in Ukraine. That was true in March 2022, and it is extremely true now. Okay? It's not understandable. The situation is not as complex as you would like to believe. When it comes to the war in Ukraine, the situation is actually so clear-cut, morally and otherwise, that you could not get it. You could not have a simpler situation, actually, unironically, or have spouted iterations of Kremlin revisionist history that uses Western hypocrisy to deflect from Russia's war crimes. As someone who grew up in Uzbekistan, a country once part of the Soviet Union, and with deep historical and economic ties to Russia, has been disheartening to see, as has a widespread lack of engagement with leftist voices from Ukraine and other ex-Soviet countries. I still count myself because I'm from the Soviet sphere. Well, both sides are killing each other. Who can say who's in the wrong? True, nobody can, ever. Reductive arguments I keep hearing again and again mostly focus on the Cold War, ignore both Russia and Ukraine's political ambitions post-1991, and offer a little by way of insight in 2022. In the eyes of those who think like this, people are either Team NATO or Team Russia. There's no in between. Lives being lost in the war have become mere pawns in the wider game of arguing ideology. Some insist these views are marginal, tucked away in dusty corners of extremist online spaces, but these are genuine views I've come across in real life, which only seem to have grown more polarized since Russia's invasion. I mean, if you want a really high-profile example of horrible views on Ukraine, just look at Noam Chomsky. Okay? I was critical of Noam Chomsky before it was cool because I've always felt like his linguistic prescriptions were pretty... I've always hated his linguistic prescriptions. The universal grammar theory always seemed like complete nonsense to me. So I basically was a Noam Chomsky hater before it was cool. Hey Lucy, so how your existence somewhere out there is going? So as I see you finally discovered the Ukrainian Lady channel, I'm actually Pepe Hands right now. So what do you think? Wait, what Ukrainian Lady channel? Hold on, wait, what are you talking about? What Ukrainian Lady channel? Okay, you have to elaborate. You have to elaborate. Do you mean that lady's channel that I watched? Okay, I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna go back and show you. Do you mean this lady? Do you mean this channel? Elaborate for me, please, so that I can get into it. Also, I'm pretty sure, I don't know why the names of some users in the chat have changed, but I'm pretty sure this is Vladimir. No elaboration? Okay, I'm gonna continue reading then, and once you tell me, I'm gonna address it. You're only listing the at now. What a weird change. I have no clue why this changed. So yes, Noam Chomsky is like this big example. Yes, the Ukrainian lady that doing history. And yes, I am also getting back to lock-in. And also, yes, my nickname now changed. Yeah, like, you want my opinion on that lady's channel? You know that channel. And you want my opinion. Oh God, I raged on, okay, I'm gonna do a little bit of side rant, okay? I've been recommended this video about Russia, why, I think it just appeared on YouTube in my recommended, why the Baltic states and Poland fear Russia or something, and I thought to myself, wow, a video that sort of explained to Westerners why Russia sucks. That could be nice. I could like sort of bond with a different creator to sort of, over bashing Russia. And then I just heard a bunch of historical inaccuracies, a bunch of nonsense, and I just got really pissed at that channel, okay? And then I realized that there's a really weird missing of talking about Ukraine in the video. So, I don't know. Maybe you will not like my opinion, but that channel has problems, okay? Especially since it's a channel that talks about history. And it's a channel that talks about history horribly. Like, instead of enjoying my Russia bashing, I had to correct the channel several times on basic facts. And that is not good. I don't like that, I do not like that. I like it when my history channels treat history seriously. okay? When they don't say the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth fell because of the small ice age, because it got cold and everybody became poor because the crops were bad. That's okay. I'm getting angry again, but you know what I mean. I think you understand what, you know. Do you know where I'm coming from? I really sincerely hope you understand where I'm coming from with this, you know, or that Russia has this authoritarian tendency because during the Ice Age, the Big Ice Age, when it was called, being the bigger bully meant survival, and that mentality just stayed with Russia. Like, what? Come on, let's be serious for a bit. Oh boy. So like it's from those big glaring problems that I have to smaller problems, like saying that, to bigger problems, like saying that in 1569, Poland and Lithuania finally forged a union, forged an alliance finally, and created the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, when in fact Poland and Lithuania created a sort of an alliance far earlier in the 1300s. So I don't know. The historian in me rages when watching this channel. What else? What else was there? There was so much. Oh yeah, and that the Grand Duchy of Lithuania had it all. It had it all. It had it all. It had people. It had land. It had the greatest thing ever. Okay. If it get really bad, I mean really bad, and that is going to become like super pro-Ukraine and also super anti-Russia, I'm going to just stop watching. Like, I mean, and the video that I watched, I don't know, the Ukraine was just not talked about at all. So it was just about the pain of the Baltic states and Poland. Ukraine and Belarus were omitted from the discussion. So there you go. Okay. Great Dutch Lithuania had it so good that they had iPhones and widescreen TVs. True. That is true. This is the best country in the universe. It's definitely was not the case that it was basically forced into going into the Kingdom of Poland to cooperate because of the problems with the war. That was absolutely not a thing, trust me. Okay, let's continue. All right. I've even begun to wonder if apologist narratives justifying Russian aggression from Western leftists are a manifestation of Western imperialism. You know what? I'm gonna go there. It sort of kind of is, in a weird way. The way certain leftists in the West talk about this topic is sort of a manifestation of imperialism, in the sense of believing that Western is the main causer and everyone else is just a passive recipient, if that makes sense. Even if you are sort of anti-imperialist, you still sort of believe that the West has like this ultimate power to affect things. Lots of so-called leftist orgs don't even bother acknowledging Ukraine on their sites, and lots of leftist tubers just omit Ukraine in their videos. Oh, can you name them? Also, I don't think I've seen you here before. Welcome to the stream. Okay, I'm sorry to do this, but how did you find the stream? What other streamers do you watch? And how do you like the show so far? I ask those questions to all new viewers, especially now that the names have been changed to @. So I'm not sure if you were here before or not, and you seem unfamiliar. So can you name those leftist tubers that omit Ukraine in their videos? I am very curious. Zalrock VODs, I've been here before. Zalrock is the YouTuber? Don't your analytics show who your viewers also watch? Yeah, but not exactly on an individual level, if that makes sense. Actually, I would like to see those analytics right now. Also, I have a very small audience, so sometimes the audience is so small that the analytics actually don't tell me not enough data or something. There you go. What do your viewers watch for the last 7 days? Not enough data. What channels do your viewers watch over the last 28 days? Not enough data. So, no. My analytics, in fact, do not tell me what my viewers watch. Like, I did get the stuff that back in the day, it's not been perfect. Like, you're rather part of one empire or another, and like, it wasn't that bad in Poland, Lithuanian Commonwealth. Shame. Well, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth was not an empire. It was a composite state. But yeah, it wasn't that good under the Russian Empire. Under the Russian Empire, it was the worst, actually. I'm on Progressive Liberals Discord server, and as for leftist tubers, John the Duncan is someone who has made pro-Palestine content but zero Ukraine videos. Okay, I'm not necessarily going to be mad at people for having a focus, if that makes sense. Like, if you cover Ukraine, or if you cover Palestine, like, as long as your views on Ukraine are not horrible, as long as you're not gonna be like, oh, maybe Russia's right, maybe Russia's okay to attack Ukraine, maybe Ukraine should sort of not be funded, supported, etc., then I'm not even necessarily going to be mad at creators for having a very strict focus of I'm covering this, I learn about this, I know a lot about this, this is my wheelhouse, this is my main subject, and this is what I focus on. Does that make sense? As long as you just don't start spouting complete horse shit about other things that you don't know about. Does that make sense? Right? Like, there are people that are creators that have their very specific focus and even go to the countries and report on them. And I don't know if that's the case for John. You should speak on things you don't know anything about. Oh, okay. I see how it is. Laser Pig is cool. Yeah, Laser Pig is cool. It would be cool to do some collab together. Yeah, by the way, since you're all here, this is the perfect opportunity for me to do a little bit of shilling. Is it okay for me to do a little bit of shilling? So I'm going to go to Ukraine very soon, possibly tomorrow, which is today, because I returned from Ukraine just a few days ago because my dog really missed me, and I have to go back to Poland every now and then to check on my dog, make sure that he doesn't miss me. I mean, he does miss me, but I sort of spend a little bit time with him, and then I go back to Ukraine. I focus on interviews with organizations that cover the topic of children that are affected by war in Ukraine. And that goes into a couple of subcategories. Children overall in the country that suffer from bombardment, wartime conditions, children that have parents and relatives in the military and how that affects them. That is one subject that I sort of delve into. The other subject is children that were kidnapped by Russia and taken into Russian territory and are Russified into being Russians, and then Russian soldiers who will be then sent to Ukraine to fight against Ukrainians. That's another topic that I delve into. And third topic, which I count as a separate category, is children living in the occupied territories by Russia that are also Russified, etc. And within these subcategories, you have further subcategories: the militarization of children, which I have mentioned, violence against children, physical and sexual, which is two subcategories in subcategories. There's a lot, okay? And if you want to help me in my endeavor in that sphere field that is pretty underreported, I do a lot of interviews with families and with organizations that provide mental health care to children, then why not consider joining lucyhaze.org/live and donating or subscribing, okay? Maybe Ukraine does have these secret biolabs trying to change Russia's genetics. Yeah, I agree, Lucy. If you're pro-Russia leftist, you can start to believe in pretty weird stuff. True. I hate New York Times for holding water for Russia's genocide and war crimes. New York Times, by the way. The New York Times was the newspaper that infamously in the 30s created Holodomor skepticism. You should look into it. The New York Times in the 30s published an article called Russians Hungry But Not Starving. It was written by, I believe, a journalist called Walter Duranty, and it downplayed the Holodomor. It said that it was not a big deal. It said that nothing really happened. That you cannot make out. That was the best argument that by Walter Duranty, the Pulitzer winner. You cannot make an omelet without breaking a few eggs. That's brilliant in the context of the Holodomor. But yeah, the New York Times has a very, very specific history when it comes to tackling these issues, just so you know. And of course, there was another famous journalist of that time called Gareth Jones. Gareth Jones was a journalist that went to the Soviet Union. Gareth Jones went to the Soviet Union, even though there were very harsh restrictions on where you could go and not go in the Soviet Union. Gareth Jones sort of broke those restrictions. He decided to ignore the government and traveled through the small villages of Soviet Ukraine and witnessed firsthand the horrible conditions in which people lived during the Holodomor. And then he tried to go to the West, break the story, talk about the Holodomor, talk about the famine, talk about the genocide, and he was buried. He was buried by no other than Walter Duranty. It was a whole... actually, why not? Why? You know what? Why not look into it right now? Because it seems like some people don't know about it. Walter Duranty versus Gareth Jones. Also, there's been a whole petition to take away Walter Duranty's Pulitzer. A Tale of Two Journalists, Walter Duranty and Gareth Jones. Very, very interesting. On June 24th, the Pulitzer Committee received a letter from Dr. Margaret Cyril Colley and her son. The letter is too long to quote in full, but the text can be found here. The lady is the niece of certain Gareth Jones, a journalist who dared to tell the truth about the horror he saw in Ukraine in the spring of 1933. For his courage, he paid with a professional reputation and for many years almost sank into oblivion. And the negative hero in this story is Walter Duranty, who won the Pulitzer Prize in 1932 for reporting from the Soviet Union, which he admitted reflected the official views of the Soviet government. He spread Soviet propaganda and he got a Pulitzer for it. Okay, he got a Pulitzer for spreading the party line of the Soviet Union. Please think about it for a bit, okay? Please think about this. Not his own, okay? Again, I will read this again. He admitted reflected the official views of the Soviet government, not his own. And here begins the story of a journalist who has killed for honesty, who was killed for honesty, and his colleague rewarded for lying. A story that is directly related to both journalistic ethics and Ukrainian history. And yes, I also know about the modern day New York Times exploits and articles about Ukraine, about the neo-Nazi battalions, etc. Yeah, I think that this is very important history to know about. How I think the story of Russians hungry but not starving is actually pretty important to know. In the context of, I feel like this is important. The Klux sure didn't have the opportunity to crack many eggs. Well, there were the eggs, so the people were the eggs in that metaphor. So yeah. Okay, okay, that was an aside. I'm glad that I was able to inform about the greatness of the New York Times. But now we go back to talking about what is really important, and that is Western leftists criticizing Ukraine somehow for defending itself. It's a beautiful world. It really is a beautiful world. It really is. I swear to God. But don't worry. We have a lot of news to cover tonight, and I haven't even covered a single topic yet. I haven't covered a single news topic yet. So, manifestation of Western imperialism, which I sort of kind of can see. In the sense that everything is positioned as byproduct of the West. Yes, exactly. That is what I said as well. everything is a byproduct of the West. Everything is dictated by the West. Everything was moved by the West. Everything else is just a piece in the all-powerful hand of the West. I like the rants. Yeah, maybe it should be my main thing, ranting. Maybe I should become a rant streamer and create a rant sauna. Whatever. Let's face it, my real face is my rant sauna. I don't need a drawn rant sauna. All I have to do is show my face. It's in this context that the term West-plaining has emerged. I don't like this term because I don't think identity inherently determines whether someone's position is correct, and because outside of the usual criticisms, NATO expansion in Europe and its approach to Russia has been a failure, as many post-Soviet leftists agree. And also there are many people that are from the so-called West that have perfectly fine opinions. They have a knowledge base, they've studied the subject, they are interested in knowing about what they're talking about, and they are worth listening to. And you should listen to them, and you should support them whenever you can. Yet there's something to be said about parts of the Western left being both loud and wrong about the invasion while ignoring leftists living under Putin's sphere of influence regarding the material realities of their respective countries. And also I have to add, okay, because I feel from my perspective that it's important to add, maybe my sense of left and right is skewed because I come from this part of the world, and I will admit that the way you view left and right will be a little bit different depending on where you live. But from my perspective, there are actual left-wing content creators online that have perfectly good opinions on Ukraine. Like, there are content creators that are, in my mind, maybe not leftists per se, but left-wing, and they have very good opinions on the war. So let's not lose sight of that as well. Breaking news. Western left is discovering that modern Russia is the byproduct of the Soviet Empire and also the Russian Empire. Keg W, true. Breaking. The news are in fact so breaking that I feel broken by them. Yet there's something to be said about parts of the Western left being both loud and wrong about the invasion while ignoring leftists living under Putin's sphere of influence regarding the material realities of their respective countries. Why does this matter? Because without a unified showing of international solidarity with the victims of this war, or any effective anti-war efforts, it will only grow uglier and more lives will be lost. Well, this is an article from 2022, so I wasn't sure whether I was alone in these frustrations, so I spoke with other leftists from ex-Soviet countries about how and why parts of the Western left are failing not just in their analysis of the Russian invasion, but also in their solidarity. Here's what they had to say. The below interviews have been edited for length and clarity. Perfect. The world has changed. We can no longer use a unipolar framework to understand it. Oksana Duchak, 34, is a sociologist studying female labor in the context of capitalism and co-editor of the left-wing Ukrainian journal Common Struggle. Normally based in Kyiv, she is currently in Western Ukraine. I'm going to be talking about Western Ukraine tonight. Oh God. This is when we're going to be talking about the news, finally, because we have a lot to talk about. I'll tell you what. There's a lot to talk about once more. You would not believe just how much there is to talk about. Like, the US has a lot of influence, but it is not as simple as to say that they are the sole movers, the sole cause. Yeah, it is not. It's never that easy. It's never that simple. And that is how you get brainless narratives. That is how you get into the whole campism thing. That is how you arrive at, thank you, Incub. That is how you arrive at leftists that are anti-war and also somehow anti-Ukraine. It's ridiculous. I think Non-Smoker is such an example of a leftist that is anti-Ukraine in practice. What was evident from the beginning of the war was that many leftists, not only Western ones, used dogmatic slogans instead of analysis. Yes, thank you. And that was true in 2022 when this article was written, and that is unfortunately still true to this day. Jordan has donated $5. They said FIDO Fund. Thank you for the FIDO Fund. I appreciate it. I appreciate it a lot, and I think Fido appreciates it even more. You know what? Even more, I appreciate your presence here. I appreciate you being here to listen to my rants. I'll be going to Ukraine soon, so every single dollar counts. Every single dollar counts. Think of the children, okay? Think of the children. But yes, slogans instead of analysis. That is the biggest problem. Of course, alright, I'm gonna say that this can go too far. And there is a sort of... I have noticed within certain peers of creators, I'm not gonna name them. I'm gonna describe it, and I'm gonna see if any creators come to your mind when I describe the negative things that I have noticed. There is a certain subset of political commentators that will take a situation and analyze it, but do it in such a way as to completely, how should I put it, stack out the humanity out of it. They treat humans like numbers. They dryly treat everything as a collection of facts. They will approach death of civilians, war crimes, and anything else with this dry demeanor of... It's hard for me to explain it, but there's a lack of humanity in the analysis, and you cannot just separate the humanity from the analysis, okay? And just treat people and events as statistics to analyze, if that makes sense. Is to logically call the analyze. Does that make sense? I'm not sure if you thought of any content creators when I described this, but basically there is this sort of phenomenon existing in the air, in this sphere, in this space. So I thought I'd mention it. So slogans instead of analysis. They didn't even bother analyzing what was happening on the ground, and instead have been repeating the same old truth that has stopped being relevant some years ago. I also didn't realize how different the situation would be now. However, the world has changed. We can no longer use a unipolar framework to understand it, at least on the regional level. We are now speaking of another hegemony and imperial power. Statistically speaking, yes, Vladimir Putin is bad. Getting treated as a number is better than getting forgotten altogether. Sometimes getting treated as a number basically means being forgotten altogether, you know? Like, if you say today village A was attacked, 5 casualties, you're a number. You're forgotten very quickly. Very quickly you get forgotten. Welcome back, Greater Range. Where is it? Where was I? Oh, there we go. I found my way. Lucky it's not everyone. Like, there's a difference between between reading in an article, kids die, 15 children died, 15 children were hurt. Well, I'm gonna go to my main topic of what I do in Ukraine. Like, it becomes a totally different conversation when you have an article about an attack. Russia bombed Kyiv. 15 people died, 5 of them were children. And when you have a conversation of young Dmitry told me about how he goes every day to study, to practice football, and his dream is to become a professional player. But one day, his house was bombed and all the floors above him have caved in, and ever since then, he was not able to come out of his apartment, his new apartment, because he is always scared. And all the friends that he has in the playground have died because they have been victim to the recent attack. And he said that he misses his friends and that he does not know what to do. I just made this story up on the fly, but you see how it sort of creates a little bit of a different conversation, you know? when you sort of get into the individual situations and individual stories of, like, you have to understand that the life of a child in Ukraine is the life of a person that potentially regularly loses their friends, for example. You know, I used to have this many friends, but now I keep losing them because they die, right? And that is also a very difficult thing to tackle with for children. The fact that they are losing, very young children are just losing their friends. And it's a thing that you can discuss not just in the context of war in Ukraine. It is definitely a big thing that you can discuss in the conflicts within the context of other current conflict, other situations that are happening across the world currently. Okay, let's continue. Luckily, it's not everyone. Many people analyzed and condemned what was happening instantly, but there is also this kind of logic when people recognize that yes, Russia is doing bad things, but at the same time, they're trying to explain its actions by referring to the actions of NATO and Western countries, which is kind of weird because it denies agency to Russia, and any country has the option to not react to provocation. Also, I will again say that there are commentators that, when it comes to the topic of Ukraine specifically, in my mind, they are left-wing. They analyze the situation in Ukraine through the lens of the history of the region, of the geopolitics of the region. It's not always through the lens of the West, NATO provocation, etc. There are people that do it in a different way, and I think you should appreciate them. Okay? I think you should appreciate those people for their work. I also understand where it comes from. Since the 90s, we have lived in a single hegemony. Yet, this is precisely why the materialist left should analyze material reality and see how the power dynamics are changing. But Lucy, I was told by the internet left that I should express my empathy and humanity for every Palestinian life that has been lost, not the Ukrainian ones. Well, unfortunate as it is, I think it's okay. We could go into how much disservice to the Palestinian cause this sort of attitude does, but I think we all understand it here. I don't think I have to go into a whole rant about it. Okay. This is partially due to a very Western-centric way of thinking. Oh yeah, unfortunately, I have, those are like pro-NATO life that has been lost. Like, I suppose that's not that important ones. True. But I have, unfortunately, been exposed to that sort of very Western-centric way of thinking. That is unfortunately true. Today, for example, I came across an online event organized by a British leftist group on the Ukrainian situation, and there was not a single Ukrainian person speaking. I remember that actually. I think I remember that actually. Because again, this is an article from 2022, so I can pull out my hindsight is 2020 hat and talk about how I remember this happening. There are speakers from the decolonization perspective, but not a single person from Ukraine. This points to some systemic mistakes in how we construct leftist knowledge. For example, a very prominent creator called Hassan Piker, I don't think he talked to any Ukrainian person to date on his show, and he has expressed some pretty strong opinions on Ukraine. So that would be a pretty big example of what is being talked about in this old article. That is good. That is good, Jordan. It's sad because we have had years to establish a serious anti-war movement to critique the Ukrainian invasion. Maria, 36, is an academic working on the Soviet legacy of the early revolutionary period from a Russian town close to the border of eastern Ukraine. She's currently based in London. I think what has been frustrating is that even 8 years ago, after the seizure of Crimea and all the events which then took place in the Donbass region, some of us here in London tried to bring the unfolding conflict to people's attention. There have been protests, publications, and attempts to launch the debate on how the West should react to this. The same happened with Russia's involvement in Syria and support of Assad there. We found that it was very hard to not only organize an anti-war movement, but also to have a serious discussion about the role of Russia, because apparently the anti-war position is not condemning the aggressor for some reason, which is pretty ridiculous. Destiny doesn't want to talk with Hassan. Destiny is not Ukrainian, okay? We reached out to the Stop the War coalition, which we think would have been a good place to start as they protested against the Iraq war, but the group completely ignored us and supported the narrative of the Russian government about Syria and Ukraine. Overall, I think the tendency was just to blame the US in all this conflict and ignore the shift in geopolitical infrastructures after 1991 and the dangers they might bring. I think you can link this to Nazism and parliamentary groups in Ukraine and the exaggerated narrative about them. There is no Nazi president of Ukraine, nor there is actually a Jewish president of Ukraine, nor a Nazi party in power. However, as a consequence of this war, the ideas might gain more popularity not only in Ukraine but also in Russia. Violence produces violence, and the longer this war goes on, the worse it is for the entire post-Soviet space. My space as well. Destiny is too busy dealing with serious accusations made against them. Uh-oh. Nationalism gets even more aggressive and people feel more patriotic because war tends to militarize minds. It's sad because we had years to establish a serious anti-war movement to critique the Ukrainian invasion more coherently, both politically and theoretically. Still, we lost this time because instead we watched different marginal left groups competing over this kind of anti-NATO discourse. Now, it is clear how this anti-NATO discourse is helpless to tackle what is going on. I think this has been the most frustrating thing to see overall regarding the left, especially in the UK, which has a strong tradition of anti-war movements and international solidarity. We will be talking about the UK today. This might just be my next topic. I might mention the UK shortly, right after it's gonna be a thing, okay? It's definitely going to be a thing. Is the UK a relevant country to the news that I'll be talking about? Yes. Another issue is that many contemporary left groups support Putin because they still identify Russia as the Soviet Union. So they think that it's actually struggles with Nazism, and they fail to understand that Russia now is a different state, that the Soviet Union collapsed. And the Soviet Union was not that great to begin with, so the Russian Federation is a different state, and while of course it draws on some Soviet aspirations, this is mostly a cynical ideological attempt to reclaim the Russian imperialist agenda of the 19th century. Putin borrows many Stalinist and post-Stalinist ideas, as well as also plays with the memory of the Second World War and the anti-fascist movement. Essentially what he wants is to seize Ukraine and create a new state, a union of the Russian Federation, Belarus and Ukraine. There's been a lack of engagement with the left in Eastern Europe and in post-Soviet countries. Yeah, I know that there's been a lack of engagement with me. I agree. I am the Eastern European leftist, and I have been left in the dust. Have you noticed? Have you noticed how neglected I am? I feel very sad about it. It is the saddest thing ever. There's nothing sadder in the world. Oh man. Severia Bielitskite, 28, is an NGO worker from Lithuania who lives in London. I think there's been a tendency to navel gaze within some factions of the British left, and over time, that means people don't really understand the perspectives of leftists from Eastern Europe or post-Soviet countries. Either that or they romanticize the Soviet Union. One example of this was when people reluctant to even talk about Ukraine and Russian aggression in the years leading up to the invasion. You should email Novara and demand to become the Eastern Europe correspondent. Hold on. Is this a good outlet? Is Novara Media a good outlet? I could unironically contact them and send them my new article. I wrote it in English. Do you think it could be a good idea? I don't know much about this outlet. Okay, let's go. Perhaps our energy should be going into looking at how we can build alliances with the left in Ukraine and support them in whatever happens next. I've said the same to my comrades in Lithuania. Something that the Ukrainian left has called for its alleviating debt, which comes under the critique of the global financial system that the Western left is great at analyzing. So why aren't we amplifying those calls? Pussy Haze was treated very bad, especially by Twitch. Like, why is nobody promoting leftist content creators on the leftist platform? True. It's because I'm Jewish, isn't it? There we go. I've solved this puzzle. It's because I'm Jewish. That is why Twitch hates me. I have a brilliant sense of humor. Something that the Ukrainian left has called for, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I already read this part. What I've been talking about with other Lithuanians is what we essentially need to disentangle ourselves a little from the Western leftist thought and start developing our own links across ex-Soviet countries. That could be interesting. That could be interesting in the content creator sphere because many Western leftists are anti-establishment. I wonder if they feel they must see some value in what Russia is doing. Yeah, because Russia is so anti-establishment. If you're anti-establishment, you definitely should be pro-Russia. Twitch hates you because you don't blindly support Hassan Piker. Aizada Aristanbek, 27, is a sociology PhD student from Kazakhstan who is based in New York. Because I study sociology, I think about how people tend to think in binaries a lot of the time, and it helps them to oversimplify a situation. But doing so also makes them prone to choosing sides, feeling like they have to be pro something or anti something. Because many Western leftists are anti-establishment, I wonder if they feel they must see some value in what Russia is doing. Many see the Ukrainian invasion as a conflict between two actors, but they don't realize that all of this has a chain reaction across the region. Central Asia, Georgia, Armenia, some people are standing Zelensky, while others say death to Putin. But all of this overlooks the systems that normalize totalitarianism. Russia is just anti-West, not anti-establishment. It's just a different type of establishment. I mean, the Russian authoritarian government is the establishment. A big concern for me is how the war will affect Central Asia and how the region may become collateral damage. We're talking specifically about the collapse of very fragile economies and poor people getting poorer and lacking access to many things. Then, there is the fear that many people have in Central Asia and specifically in Kazakhstan because we share a long border with Russia about where Putin's eyes will fall next. And then we're also thinking about how people are now relocating from Russia to Central Asia and how this throws us back in a lot of our own post-Soviet processes and struggles, specifically when it relates to language and the decolonial social movements. All of these things are incredibly important and they are going to echo in the region for decades to come. But this doesn't seem very interesting to anyone outside the Central Asian and post-Soviet regions. I would say, I would love to be able to say, well, you know what, it's interesting to me, so I'm talking about her, but then I just remember that I am actually from a post-Soviet region, sort of. So